Catherine, maybe.
We're going to have it all.
Looking for it.
Oh, yeah, he's going to prep it all.
Kia ora tātou. Maralei, ni Samua. Talawhalawa. Greetings everyone. I'm sure we are all refreshed after our morning tea. And I'm sure we will tackle this task ahead of us. In doing that, so I think the President is willing to lead us with our next song. And I invite everyone to please be upstanding. Please be upstanding and we'll sing Don't You Like My Song.
My spirit.
Thank you.
Vice President Edwini, we move to questions 28A, 28B and 28C, which are the questions relating to Investment Advisory Board, Methodist Trust Association and PAC 2086 Trust. And we welcome to the conference Jane Darville, who is the chair of those boards, and Julie Adamson, who is about to become a member of two of those boards. The business relating to these boards is in two parts. The first part is that the Investment Advisory Board and its functions will now be included in the functions of the Trust Association. The business of the Methodist Trust Association and PAC 2086 are the revisions of their constitutions. The revisions need to be treated differently, and the reason for this is that the PAC 286 constitution needs to be approved over two conferences. So the reason for that is that PAC 286 is written in such a way that it makes it very difficult for the church to get its hands on the money prior to 2086. One of the suggestions in the reframing of the Constitution is that the clauses of the Constitution, except for those clauses that relate to being able to use the funds, when the Constitution is amended, it would enable the conference to amend the other clauses on a simple basis, as it's able to do with MTA, not having to go to two conferences. It seems overkill to have to go to two conferences to make minor changes. And so there would be, in the PAC 286 Constitution, there would be a two-stage process depending on which part of the Constitution was being considered. So effectively that means that the changes in the agenda for PAC 286 are being advised to this conference and do need to be accepted as such, but they will not be fully received and ratified until conference next year. It also means for that constitution that if there were any other matters that needed amendment, in other words, we've made some drafting mistakes or whatever, those can be corrected between now and conference next year. When conference votes on the PAC 286 constitution next year, it must be passed by a 2/3 majority. The MTA constitution, this conference is able to make the changes, and in accord with what we advise the church, these constitutions have been widely circulated to enable synods and Te Taha Māori to respond. Two synods in particular responded in significant detail, Auckland and Central South Island. Those responses were sent to the lawyer who's been assisting with drafting the Constitution and have been, for the most part, included or changes have been made to in response to the suggestions. Not all. There were suggestions that some of the clauses in the Constitution, which are common to all trusts, perhaps could be left out, because if you're a charitable trust, you are bound by it anyway. The decision of the boards is that they would prefer to have their trust deeds being entire and complete, so that any potential board member or anyone inquiring into the work of the trust could actually see the entire constitution without having to refer to other documentation. The third matter is the amalgamation of the Investment Advisory Board into the Methodist Trust Association. And the reason for that is twofold. The Investment Advisory Board, when it was first established, advised the church on commercial property development, and also has the function of ensuring that the church's socially responsible investment criteria are up to date. The function of giving advice in terms of commercial property in recent years has fallen to the Methodist Connectional Property Committee. That the expertise that originally was in IAB is now actually found in MCPC. The socially responsible investment provisions, Methodist Trust Association needs to abide by those, and so moving those into the Trust Association means that the church still has a vehicle to amend, to approve, and to adopt socially responsible investment criteria. It's not removing it, it's just removing it from one board to another. And effectively that means that the work of the Investment Advisory Board is no longer required as a separate board. And so the recommendation to conference is that the Investment Advisory Board, that its functions be moved into the Methodist Trust Association and the Methodist Connectional Property Committee, and that the board members be thanked and the board be closed. So on that basis, Vice President Edwini, I would move the suggested decisions under 28A and B en bloc. And then when we come to 28C, we do need to have a 2/3 majority.
Thank you, David. Is it the line of conference to move 28A and B en bloc? Thank you. That's the line of conference. Is conference a firm decision made?
Yes.
I think that's been affirmed in the conference.
So the decisions of the Pact 286 Trust is that to do with the Constitution, we needed 2/3 majority, which is a little unusual in consensus. So the decision relating to the Pact 286 Trust Constitution, put that decision and be assured that there's a 2/3 majority within the life of conference. I'm not certain there's actually a decision there for it, is there?
There isn't.
No, there isn't. We need to add it, okay? That's why, and likewise, actually, for the MTA one, there's actually not a decision there, is there? All right, we'll fix that. That the decision for Pact 286 is that conference, as the first step of a 2-year process, approves the changes as recommended to the Pact 2086 Constitution.
We'll do a show of hands, David.
Can conference affirm that suggested decision? Please put your hands.
Maybe if we ask the other question now, is there anybody who disagrees? Okay, so
Does anybody disagree? Please put your hands.
Okay, so the required majority is there.
It's unanimous.
Yeah. And we need to go back to 28B and we need to add a decision that the conference agrees to the changes as set out in the report for the Methodist Trust Association Constitution.
Is that line of conference?
Yes.
Thank you. That's been affirmed by the conference.
Thank you. I believe that completes the report. But in doing so, I welcome Jane and want to acknowledge that Jane concludes her term as chair and on the board in just over a month. And on behalf of the church, Jane, to thank you for the considerable work that you've put into these trusts, and particularly into this work of ensuring that our constitutions are up to date. It's been a long time since they were written, and various things change in trust law and other things, and it is necessary for a modern trust board or trust constitution to be accurate, or else it puts the trustees and or the church at risk. So Jane, thank you for the work that you've done on our behalf. We really do appreciate it.
Friends, we come to sheet 9. Ministry. I understand we have Bella and Marilyn who will take us through this. What a privilege.
Prei tini tuarua I tui tēnā koe. Prei tini Andrew, tēnā koe. Te kai komihana te kani, tēnā koe. Koutou ngā mema o te hui tōku, tēnā koutou katoa. Firstly, I bring the apologies of the principal who would normally be presenting the Trinity College report. He's had a slight mishap, so he's not going to be here for this time. So I present the board the report from Trinity College. Just a couple of things I want to talk to. A reminder, really. You will see the first line of that report begins Te hā o te hihi ka roa. The whakatauki gifted to the college several years ago by the late Reverend Napi Waka. It is something that, and it's kind of dropped off the agenda, and we've tried to continue to use it so it becomes part and parcel of who we are as Trinity College, not just the work within our teaching and training programs, but also with our name. We get a lot of brickbats, sometimes not many bouquets. But the celebration of Trinity College, the milestones of 175 years of theological education was celebrated at the end of 2019. And I want to say that it was, we were proud to be able to do that for the church and to have our church historian Donald Phillips speak to us and take us down some of those journeys of the past. Council also want to advise the church that the 6-year review of the principal's position has been conducted and completed, and the council affirm the continued position of Reverend Dr. Nasili Vakauta in the role of principal of Trinity College. The work of the college is very much embarking on a new direction in the world of theological education. And just to pick up a couple of points there, part of that has been in the public square. And I bring your attention to the two papers that went out this year. One on Black Lives Matter, and a statement in the end-of-life choice referendum for the church's engagement to enable our church members in the pews all over the country to be able to engage with these matters. Part of that theological training that the college takes as its brief. I don't think I really want to highlight anything further, so I'd ask that the reporters, in the first instance.
Is the mind of conference to receive the report?
Yeah.
I'd also like to put the remaining decisions 2, 3 and 4 on block.
Mind of conference suggested decision 2, 3 and 4 on block.
Yes.
Thank you.
That completes the work of Trinity College. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Vice President Ituini, President Andrew, General Secretaries Tara and David, and members of conference. I have pleasure in presenting the Mission Resourcing Board report, and I notice that in the way the questions have come up, that both Bella and I have a lot of other tasks which usually come under the Mission Resourcing Board. So if, first of all, I could move that the report of Mission Resourcing be received.
Can I ask a conference report to be received?
Yes.
Thank you. The board report is received.
And then I ask to go on block suggested decisions, another 1 and 2, so say 2 and 3.
Conference suggested decision 1, 2 and 3.
Now, I am aware that the James and Martha Trounson Benevolent Trust, and right down to just before the Grafton Downs Limited, these groups actually report to Mission Resourcing, or they put in their reports through Mission Resourcing. And because this year, if you didn't have anything urgent that needed to come to conference, there was no report put in by these. But is it appropriate for me to say, can we put on block all the that there are no reports, but under that the Methodist Lay Preachers Network for 2021, their membership, and I think that's the only one, yes. So could we, pardon? Oh, and the Trounson Benevolent Trust, if those could be put on block to the conference.
Can I ask conference, can we put that on block? So suggested decision? Thank you.
Thank you.
Gillian, can I ask if you would like to speak to the Wesley College Trust Board? Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Kia ora koro ngā prehitini me ngā prehitini tueroa. Nā Jesus e roa, and David tēnā koe. Tai te kia koe i te kōpihanga. Morena koutou. Gillian Lee was my portai for Wesley College at this time. I bring the report to be received this morning.
Point of conference to receive the report. Thank you.
I also bring the names to be confirmed for our membership. Question number 2, please.
Is that the line of conference to receive those names for membership for Wesley College Trust Board? Number 2? Thank you.
With no further questions, my work is done.
Grafton Downs, which is at the bottom of page E7, and it's reported on in the Wesley College Trust Board report on E10. Like many of us, when we went into lockdown in March, we did wonder what the impact was going to be upon on Grafton Downs. And for the directors, certainly some nervousness that a lot of money is invested in developing sections, it does. It costs a serious amount of money to develop sections, and there was nervousness thinking if the property market collapses, as people are suggesting, then we might be facing some real difficulties during 2020. In fact, as you're aware, the property market has done the exact opposite, and you'll see the report there on page E10, and when the board met a couple of weeks ago, I think the report was there are only 13 sections left available for sale. And so the task now is to prepare more sections to prepare in the next tranche. If you've not been to Wesley College recently, then you would hardly recognise the land that was formerly Dairy Farm, and you may remember that we turned the first sod when we were at conference, and Tovia did such a good job that it's been mushrooming houses all over the place. So there are, I think you'll see there that there's something like 250 sections sold, and many of them now have houses on them, and people living in them, and the community is in the process of growing. It is a complex development, and it will take quite some time, many years, before the development is complete. There have been a couple of really important decisions made by others this year to the benefit of Grafton Downs. Firstly, New Zealand Transport Agency has agreed that the roundabout at the end of the Glenbrook Road will be built, and that will be built, in fact it will be started to be built shortly, and that provides much easier access onto the new Grafton Downs site. That's, I think, an $8 million project of which the contribution from Grafton Downs is something like $500,000 or $600,000. The other really important decision is currently being determined, and that's the location of the railway station. Not if there's going to be a railway station, but the location. And they're currently doing work and testing, and the location is in a distance of something like 200 or 300 metres. It's either going to be here or there. And the significance of that, of course, for those of us who don't live in Auckland and we venture onto the motorway and we think, how can anybody possibly live in a city like this? The answer will be, for Grafton Downs, having commuter rail access will just make all the difference for those who travel further than the local community. So after some nervousness at the beginning of the year, the end of the year report is that the development really has taken some really positive and significant steps ahead. Currently, the sales that have been confirmed, now we don't have the money yet, but the sales that have been confirmed are about $36 million, and the current borrowings are about $24 million. Now, more money will be spent in developing the next lot of sections, but for the first time it's getting to the stage where the cash flow is looking very positive. So there is, the decision is that the report be received, and there's that little bit of the report there in the Wesley College Trust Board.
I would like to thank the conveners, Parapera Maha, and also Reverend Welsh and Julian Lead, for leading us with the Business Committee for Ministry.
We now come to sheet 10 and to the Conference Business Committee on Faith and Order with the corresponding report F1, and we ask David Polney to join us.
President Andrew, Vice President Atwini, General Secretaries. Sometimes I astound myself with my brilliance and my modesty. Some days I eat my soup with a fork. I had prepared a report, and the day I arrived the day before we started, I checked my phone emails, and there it was in draft still. But that being said, bearing in mind that we're dealing with urgent business, there's nothing being particularly urgent. A lot of our work stopped. Our ecumenical dialogue stopped because they depend on face-to-face engagement. But two things came out of the experience of the pandemic when really we were concentrating on getting by and people didn't have time for grand theological ideas. First of all, what's it all about? Because the pandemic has, at a theological level, threatened our sense of autonomy, and it challenges our relationship with creation. Who are we? What are we as Homo sapiens? The other issue was around questions of worship, particularly whether Holy Communion could be celebrated via Zoom, which I'd never heard of until I had to use it. And other equivalent formats. And people rang me or contacted me to ask for an opinion or a ruling even, because I am the Cardinal Inquisitor after all. And I can't do that. And people did what they did, as they felt led to, and that's right. But I'd like us to have a conversation in the coming year as life returns, hopefully something resembling normal, about what worship is, and rather than give a patchwork to that particular question, really the answer should emerge from consideration of worship. So that's what my report would have said, but you don't have that, so I should pass it. I will send it to the President, however. So simply I'm here to put our suggested decisions, which are simply a matter of keeping the show on the road and confirming membership, both for the committee itself and for our two committees under our umbrella, which are the two dialogues, the ones with the Roman Catholic Church in New Zealand and the one with the Anglican Church here. And also I will say that Faith and Order will be moving more towards electronic means of keeping our meetings together. We will meet occasionally, I hope, face to face, but the reality is that both financially, getting me the length of the country for a couple of hours, putting me up in a hotel and flying me back is quite expensive for the church. And also personally, and in terms of my work in Dunedin, it's quite costly to squeeze everything else in to do that once a month. But this is simply a matter of confirming our membership of the three, of Faith and Order of our two dialogue teams. So I ask you to approve that.
I ask conference, is that the line of conference to receive this membership, Faith and Order, Methodist Catholic Dialogue, and the membership for Methodist Anglican Dialogue. Will we affirm that conference?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David.
Friends, we now come to sheet number 11 and our Conference Business Committee on Social Services, which we have as a convener, Carol. Thank you. And you'll find the corresponding report on pages G1 to 3.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. President Andrew, Vice President Ituini, General Secretaries Tara and David. Ko Carol Barron toku ingoa. Hei kai mahi o kei purapura o Tiriana o Aotearoa. Hi, my name's Carol Barron and I'm the National Coordinator for the Methodist Alliance, but more famously known as the person in the room that's known David Bush the longest. I'm going to give you a really brief insight into the amazing work that some of our members are doing in the name of our church. The Methodist Alliance has a 13-member steering group. It has representatives from all our member missions, ethnic synods and 2 parish representatives and also 2 members from Te Taha Māori. It has 1 employee, and that's me. We have 24 members nationwide, and you can see them there. And I just note that some of our members have a nationwide scope. During the past year, the Methodist Alliance has made 4 submissions to government, and these can be found on our website. Oh, I was going to say you made it go blank for a moment there. And we have 2 Methodist representatives on the New Zealand Council of Christian Social Services. That's me and David Hanna. Our members offer services ranging from the cradle to the grave, with preschool support services to tamariki and their whānau, young people, adults and specialist services for older people, including residential care. Starting at the cradle, back. Here we go, starting at the cradle. Some of the services and programs our members provide include preschools run by the missions, toy libraries and mainly music programs and a whole range of other things offered by parishes, as well as programs to support vulnerable families. At the other end of life's spectrum, our parish members offer a wide range of services and programs for older people, including church services and residential care homes, bowls, living alone luncheons, walking groups and keep fit passes like that. And our Methodist missions also offer services to older people, including Wesley Care, which is Christchurch Methodist Mission's 108-bed residential care facility, and Wesley Community Action, who provides supported independent living and an ageing well network, and also an elder abuse response service for over 65s living in the Greater Wellington region. LifeWise has a health and disability service which helps older people living with a disability along their path to self-sufficiency, including support with housework, personal cares, shopping, carer support and respite. Colleen Macefield, who you can see here, has been a client of LifeWise for almost 15 years, and she says, "Because of my health, I would have never been able to cope without the support from LifeWise. The support over the years has helped me maintain my quality of life and independence." The Methodist Alliance is a local donation manager for the Tyndall Foundation, which means members can access this funding. And in the Tyndall's latest report to us, they highlighted Wesley Community Action's Mums and Cubs peer-led support group for parents with babies and young children in Porirua. We held a forum in November last year at Wesley Rata Village, where most people stayed on site, and we were privileged to have President Sataita, Vice President Nicola and the General Secretary-elect Tara attend. And it was also wonderful to have some of the students from Trinity Theological College participate as well. Highlights of the forum included the quiz on the Methodist Church bicultural journey, the history of Rata Village, and the whakawhanangatanga, the sharing, relationship building and network opportunities the forum provided. Out of this forum, a working group was formed to campaign for increased benefit rates. We also have 5 communities of practice which focus on the Methodist Alliance's key strategic priorities. These communities of practice are the first one is building stronger communities, which meets regularly and has enthusiastic participation from the members. They share their knowledge, experience of community-led development projects. This community of practice is building supportive partnerships and encourages parishes to consider community-led development projects. To illustrate this, the community of practice undertook training with inspiring communities and produced this video illustrating the principles of community-led development. And so this is a world premiere of this video. So if it's on your bucket list to attend a world premiere, now's your chance. Okay, I'm sorry we don't have red carpet, and Michael is going to weave his magic to make it go.
I think the point is to improve the world that we live in, make it a better world. And that starts at that community level. Many communities have strengths and assets they don't realise that they have. And sometimes it just takes someone to come in and identify those and say, hey, you know, you already have this, let's work with it and build on it. And in that way you help improve their lives and improve our lives at the same time, because we're learning as well. So we formed a partnership with Auckland North Community and Development. We were fortunate that the church was able to fund it, employed a community development worker. And that's where the Kaitahi meal started. He started talking to people within the community, made contact with 3 trained chefs. The local bowling club had a commercial kitchen in it that wasn't used a lot. Made connections with Kiwi Harvest, who go around to the supermarkets, they do rescued food. They started feeding between 100 and 150 people a month. Whoever comes along is welcome to sit down and have a meal. They might sit across from someone whom they have never met before, yet they live in the same community. Some of the community members have picked it up. They are now doing the monthly meals, plus delivering between 75 and 85 meals to those who are living on their own, the vulnerable, each week. It's important that the Methodist Alliance community practice, strengthening communities, connects with the parishes to show what can be done if they apply these principles.
Te Aola o Wahawhenua Tonga Methodist Mission, we focus on the Tongan community in New Zealand. So COVID-19 meant for Ciala, that we were going to do things differently during lockdown. And many of our families went into wage subsidies, others lost their jobs. We were able to work with government, such as the Ministry of Social Development, and also go back to our funders, which included the Methodist Church. We're doing food parcels and doing utility payments. We also distributed around 165,000 face masks. In the first wave, we helped over 2,400 families throughout New Zealand. In the second round, we helped just under 500 families. Where we have found over 94% of the families that we worked with lived in crowded homes, which meant 2 to 3 families in that home. So some of these food parcels didn't work for us, so we had to do it our way. If you put that belief system in our people, we can do anything. Being their biggest cheerleaders, getting them and their families to where they need to be so they can fly.
I think we want to really engage with our neighbours at Pitt Street. We really love the diversity of Care Road. We have community lunches twice a year where all sorts of people, some don't even have homes, come and eat, and we serve them. And we sit and eat with them. The community development, it's not about what we might get together and workshop about and decide what people want. We actually have to find out what they want. We sort of said, well, how do we do that? Well, we have to go out into the community. What? And we have to talk to people. So we got into groups. All 3 groups got an absolutely amazing positive response. Some people are very surprised when they find out we are gay friendly. We're not like some of those stereotypes that they have for church people. We actually realise it's more about them. I guess we're learning. We're on a step learning curve about how to be, church in the world.
Kids Hub, we provide free activities for whānau and tamariki because things cost so much, and any of the free things that were happening were always full. It's at a nice space now, catering for about 35 families and 100 kids. Whānau own Kids Hub. We are building leaders for the future in the Linwood community. It's the working class and a lot of people on benefits, so it's quite expensive, some of the activities you want to do. Like we went to Willowbank and the kids had a field day and they got to feed the animals. Some parents have never been to Willowbank and they've lived in Christchurch their whole life and they loved it.
I've grown a lot in confidence. It's beneficial to be in the community and we can't let it go. So it needs to be here.
Pretty amazing that they did that. They were very, very excited to be able to release it here for the first time. And someone that saw it, they wanted to show it the very next day at the church service, and they said, no, you've got to wait. It's having a world premiere at conference. So if we go into that, I can do that, can't I? The next community practice I'm telling you about is for children and families, and that held a wānanga in August this year with a focus on bringing Te Tiriti o Waitangi into daily practice. 38 practitioners attended this digital wānanga online. Some of the questions that arose included how do we influence systems to privilege the client voice and client-centred whānau-led practice? How do we hold oranga tamariki to account for their practice in a learning way? And how do we ensure our relationships and our practice with whānau, hapu and iwi is strong? Mana Whānau is one of the collaborative programs from this community of practice. It's a 6-month intensive in-home parenting support program for whānau who are at risk of having their children removed from their care by oranga tamariki. Another community of practice is Amarangi Tangata, led by Reverend Dr. Arapera Naha and Haihaitu Barrett. This brings Maori staff across the Methodist Alliance together with Te Taha Māori. It hopes to achieve a better understanding of the bicultural journey within the Methodist Alliance membership and a national Māori workforce strategy. The Communication and Fundraisers community of practice has had a focus on co-branding and has engaged with external media. moving for me, Michael. Thank you. The Housing Community of Practice works together in response to the housing crisis, and this work includes a partnership between Wesley Community Action and Airedale Property Trust at Wesley Rada Village, which has led to the development of 25 new homes. This site also hosts Kiwi Can Do job skills training with young people living in the old hospital building. They are learning valuable skills and many have gone on to secure employment in the construction industry. Methodist Mission Southern has 2 youth transition houses where 16 to 19-year-olds who would otherwise be homeless are supported to successfully transition to independent living. During COVID-19 lockdown in March, Methodist City Action delivered good, nutritious kai cooked by a qualified chef every day to Hamilton's Christian Men's Night Shelter, which had just become a 24/7 program. During this time, there was a significant reduction in the number of mental health-related outbursts, and the men said this was because of the warm, safe shelter and the regular, nutritious kai. By June 2020, Aotearoa had 18,500 households on the social housing register. This has increased 50% since June last year. One of the solutions to people experiencing homelessness is Housing First, which provides direct access to permanent housing and provides wraparound support services to maintain these tenancies. This model recognises it's easier for people to address issues such as mental health and substance use when they are housed. Lifewise and Christchurch Methodist Mission are both providing Housing First in Auckland, Rotorua, Christchurch and Blenheim. And I've got a little video that Michael's going to weave his magic on to show you just a little bit about Housing First.
Housing First is a service that offers housing and wraparound support to homeless people, chronically homeless throughout New Zealand, and works on principles around giving people choice. I think there's so many barriers for people when they cross so many barriers all through their life. So homelessness is a long journey for them, and when we have them walk into our office, they've often been through prisons and being banned out of shelters. It's nice for us to, when they walk through the door, for us to pick that up and support them and walk with them along their journey.
Look, I get a lot of satisfaction from helping my brothers, and I will call them my brothers and my sisters, and go from living on the streets into their own little house. So a lot of people are quite judgmental, and they judge the book by its cover. And you have to sort of understand the circumstances to which led them to being homeless.
We went through a bad breakup with the partner. And because she's got the children, I had to leave. Yeah, just struggling at the moment because we had joint accounts. She ended up with benefit, the bank accounts, the housing and everything else, and I ended up out here.
I got addicted to that synthetic cannabis quite a bit. When I was younger, I was like 14, I think it was.
People generally don't see them as people, so it's really nice if we can change that you know, they've had a life, they are a person, they just have some struggles that we're trying to get them through.
It's hard, it just feels like no one cares.
Going from having no identification, no bank account, no benefit to having it all is very rewarding. It's very hard not to shed a tear. To go from having nothing to having something at long last is very rewarding, eh? And it's the expressions on these people's faces that makes my job more worth it.
Obviously there's always a lack of housing, and it's difficult to find appropriate housing for single people. And now it's just connecting, our housing specialist is trying to connect with private landlords so we can get more options, I guess, and get more people into housing. So there's a few barriers there, but for landlords and us working with landlords, we can cut down those barriers. It's guaranteed rent, we inspect the property monthly, we do strip meth testing, we do all sorts of things and work with lots of agencies to eliminate any issues. So it's a great project to get involved with, and you really feel like you're doing something for someone that's really kind and caring.
Thanks, Michael. And we've got a couple of suggested decisions that you'll find. So, in response to the housing crisis, we asked conference to rise to the challenge President Andrew made yesterday to look into our own hands and recognise the skills and resources Te Hāhi Retiariana has, and to use these to be part of the solution to the housing crisis. We asked conference to affirm the statement made and agreed in the conference in 2015 that 2% of the gross sales of Grafton Down Limiters properties is set aside for the purpose of social housing. And we also asked conference to direct the General Secretary and registered Methodist community housing providers in consultation with the shareholders of Grafton Downs to develop a process and an estimated timeline for us. And the other suggested decision is about the economic recession and the need for renewal. Today, we are meeting when Aotearoa is experiencing the greatest economic recession for over 90 years and increasingly costly effects of global warming. The impact of COVID-19 is still being felt and will be for some time. Our members are Te Hāhi Retiariana's hands and feet. We stand in our Wesley tradition that marries word and deed, and the wider gospel imperative to be good news to the poor. Like General Secretary Tara said yesterday, we are committed to working for the most vulnerable in our communities. In the light of this, the Methodist Alliance requests all parts of Te Hāhi Retiariana or Aotearoa to reflect on the following questions. What deep change is God calling humanity to make? How are we good news to the poor and our planet in these times? And we ask conference to call on our government to address inequality by implementing the recommendations of the Welfare Expert Advisory Group, Whakamana Tangata, to restore dignity to the social security in New Zealand. Thank you. And we've also got all the membership decisions, so that's probably the easiest one to do first, would it be? Yes? Yeah. So we've got memberships of the boards. Decision number 3 and 4, I think, because that's the one about thanking the people that have retired since last conference.
Can I ask conference to receive the report first? Okay. Can I ask conference if you are willing to accept the membership that's been described by Carol? Yes. Thank you.
So then there's those first two decisions. That decision number 2, I'm right.
Can I ask conference if we affirm decision number 2, housing?
Just have a quick wording question on 2C. Thank you. Not a major point, but on 2C, the way that's wording, it's not absolutely clear that we're talking about the 2% in 2B. If you read the use and distribution of the proceeds, so just for, I'm sure, Carol, you'd like to have all the proceeds.
If you want to give them to us, Dan,
I knew you'd see that, but I think we need to just clarify that if we just say proceeds of sale from graft as somewhere at the 2% or as described above, just so it's clear we're only talking about that 2%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David?
I think it would be fair to say that there has been some discussion about 2% of what. And while it says here 2% gross, Jill Vandiger and I had conversation with Greg Wright, who, along with Chris Johnson, presented this to conference in 2015. Greg's recollection is that it was 2% of the sale price net of GST. So the GST component is removed. There have been others who are suggesting it is not. It is 2% net full stop, so it's the costs are taken out. The Grafton Downs annual meeting a couple of weeks ago had this conversation, and certainly is in complete and total agreement that there needs to be funds made available for social housing. I think the 2% does need to be qualified. It's at least net of GST, I think that's probably what I'd say at this stage. And Wisafili, Greg's recollection was that you were one of the people that asked a critical question that helped to clarify this, and I don't know what you can remember about that conversation.
Sorry, David, I want to remember, but I've got a senior moment.
How can that possibly be for a young man like yourself? So I'm happy with the resolution, but I think it does need to say net. It at least does need to say net of GST.
Kia ora tātou, Baranaha, Tāmaki Rohe. We're happy if that can be clarified, that 2%. And also I just want to recognise that Grafton Downs, that project was a 20-30 year plan. So if anybody's expecting 2% back tomorrow, it's not going to happen. Okay, just be realistic about what we're saying here. And the second thing that that's just to do with those recommendations there, but there's another one that Te Taha Māori wanted to put that, not sure if it fits here. So if I can just read it, then we might find a place for it to fit. And in terms of that, we Te Taha Māori affirm our commitment through Te Taha Māori Property Trust to prioritise funds for the Wesley College rebuild. We have had that before in our report, and we just want to reaffirm that. Thank you.
Vice President, I think to clarify that, I think, Bella, we might put that with the Grafton Downs report, so we'll come back to that, because I don't think it belongs in social services, but it is an important thing tonight.
It is appropriate link.
I have permission to speak because I'm not a member of the conference, but I just feel that people need to be told why there is no answer to this question. And the answer is that nowhere in the church records was the 2%, that discussion recorded.
That's right.
And David and I have been through all of, because we were both responsible for that conference, and the daily record and the journal, neither document can shed any light on it. So it is really, really important that if we pass this resolution, we cannot assume anything other than everybody agrees the 2% is there, but we do need work to be done to be brought back a proper clarification to base the whole thing on. But that's the reason we're having this discussion. People are probably wondering, what are we talking about? There is no record of that discussion.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill. That's a really good point of clarification, and it is all it is that we're asking for is to have it made very clear and transparent, so everybody's on the same page, so we know what we're doing.
The suggested decision from Te Taha Māori, we will put that in the Grafton Downs report, which I think was question 28 under mission resourcing. So we'll go back and do that because it doesn't fit in social services. It's a question about the proceeds of the development. No, we'll do it. We'll finish this business first, then we'll go back.
Kia ora. Sorry, David, I just wanted to raise the question, and I'm probably just showing my ignorance, but when you're dealing with figures such as 2% of sales of property, I wonder whether or not you've also accounted for matters such as real estate agents' fees, whether you've accounted for legal fees, which are all part and parcel of the component for conveyancing matters, and so whether or not you're talking about 2% gross, which doesn't account for those matters, and so to say that it may be net or just GST may be unwise. So I thought I'd better raise that as a question.
Takani, you're absolutely correct. Somebody did a back of the envelope calculation that 2% gross would be equivalent to 15% of profit. So just want to say about funding for social housing that the Board of Administration made a key decision in the last year to change the way that funds are linked from the Church Building and Loan Fund. And that released $9 million for additional funding and has enabled the Board of Administration through the Church Building and Loan Fund, I think so far, to fund, it might be two, I think there's 2 current funding and 1 coming up. And like we're talking about significant amounts of money. Jill, what are we, 3 million, was it?
Sorry, but they are loans.
They are loans, yeah.
With interest, but no, about 3.9 million.
To the Christchurch Methodist Mission. Wesley Community Action have a loan, and we're currently looking at one for Napier, Hastings, which is around 2.3 million. So by rethinking the way that we manage some of our funds, we have been able to find loan finance to enable our social services to actually move ahead with quite significant housing projects. But the question that Takani is raising is the key question around 2%. 2% of what? Because it does make a significant difference depending on what it is 2% of.
Man.
Following on from what Takani said, I think that we need to go further and have a commitment to defining that better, because what's going to happen if we don't is, 10 years from now, conference is going to say 2% of gross, and we need to define what that means. And I think it's also prudent from that whole standpoint of when we say gross, gross when, gross of what, when is this going to be done? So I think further work needs to be done for what that commitment actually is. And I'm not for a moment saying we should give less or trying to scrape money out of the bucket, but we need to clarify that going forward so future conferences don't have to have somebody stand up and say, they talked about this in 2020 and they just said 2% of gross, and they talked about not knowing what that meant, but they didn't say anything about taking it forward. So we need somewhere in there to have a commitment to define this in a way that going forward there's transparency for the whole time that this project's in play.
I heard that it equated to 15% of profit. Would it not be simpler just to say that?
I'm not sure that's what we meant though. That's not, I don't believe when we talked about the 2% that that's what we were talking about, and we just need to be very careful. Also remember, we may as the Board of Admin or conference have an opinion, but we're not the investors, the sole investors in Grafton Downs. So it's not quite so simple as for us to decide what we think that means and where that profit goes. That's why I'm saying there needs to be some work done in what that 2% means and where it's going to come from and how it's going to be done, because that's you can drive a bus through that, positive or negatively.
Is it possible for us to nail that down before we leave conference today? No. So how do we move forward in terms of being able to leave it open to take?
The moment to bring a report back to next conference.
You need a process,
I'm sorry, I'm a director of PACT 2086. I apologise for that, I'm leaving. But what I do want to say is that each of those 3 boards who are partners are all constituted boards who have legal responsibilities, and if we tried to do this today, we could actually put all of those directors in jeopardy. And I think Nan's given us the lead. We simply can't do it. All we can do is commit to doing it quickly and efficiently and correctly in law, because it must be legal for those of us who are liable to be able to put our hands up for it.
So we're committing to a process today that will report back to the next conference with a resolution that tidies up all the legalities.
Yeah, we probably need to say agreed in principle in there so that it's clear we don't know what that means.
Now, Vice President Etowini actually has questions. I'm going to ask him next.
Sorry, Mr. President, Andrew. I've just got a question, because we are actually talking about the social housing at the moment. I know the mission's been talking about the CHIP, but talking from the parish point of view, it's very hard to establish, especially social housing. Part of this, because the model deeds, the ownership of the property is actually with the Board of Admin. In doing so, when you are actually applying for social housing, you won't get the capital funding. I know the mission's been talking about this. Airedale property is one of the CHIPs. As we noticed, it's been affirmed by Ministry of Housing, Urban Development. And in order for that, we have to sort of like lease at zero cost in order to get the funding of the capital funding. Talking from the point of view from parishes and congregation wanting to build a social housing project, we won't be entitled for the capital funding, only the income rental subsidy. I'm sure Joe Hawkey will know more about this, but it's one of the things that we are pursuing, especially because the whole titles are under Board of Administration and it's not under the churches, so therefore we're not entitled for the capital funding, which can cost a few $1 million if Board of Admin as a chip under Housing New Zealand.
Can I just respond to that quickly? Sorry. The Housing Community of Practice is working on that to seek some clarification, and we've got a couple of suggestions about how we can manage that to get some a clear understanding with HUD about how the structure of the Methodist Church and the ownership of the land is to entitle us to have that eligibility for capital funding.
Vice President Etowini, President Andrew, members of the conference, Catherine Mulder, Central South Island, Nelson Marlborough, West Coast Synod. I'm wondering if we simply, I think one of the issues is that we need to have it recorded in the conference minutes in order to move forward, but as it stands, it doesn't work. So I am wondering whether we can affirm the statement made and agreed to at the conference 2015 that 2% of the sales of Grafton Downs Limited properties go to MCNZ for the purpose of social housing, and that I'm assuming it's going to be the Board of Administration, work on defining how that 2% will be calculated and report to Conference 2021 with an update, which then allows for it to be, so I take out the gross net of GST because we're going on historical mind. People all agreed that it was 2% of something. And how, so it's 2% of the sales, which then opens it up, whether that's net of GST, whether that's net profit, or... So it allows for that conversation to happen quite freely. And I'm wondering if that's a way forward.
I'd just like to say something quickly about that, and that is that
towns to be the ones who are in communication and come to that agreement. And Bella touched on it before. It's a 20 to 30 year project. It is currently the largest greenfield development in the Auckland region. It is huge, and part of the reason why I'm here today is because I have to sign documents as chair of PACT for a debt facility in the name of Grafton Downs that's been guaranteed by both of the major shareholders. Now, I would be very uncomfortable with an agreement that's open-ended whilst we are guaranteeing funding for that development. So there are all sorts of commercial implications, and normally I wouldn't draw attention to those. However, they are there, they exist now, and I think it's something to be aware of and take into consideration in these discussions.
If I can respond to that, Jane, I agree. I wonder whether the words "and the Board of Administration work with Grafton Downs Limited and its shareholders" as to how the 2% be calculated to report the conference 2021. The Board of Admin is one of the boards that's required to report the conference, so therefore that picks that up. But it is Grafton Downs Limited and the shareholders that need to be, the conversation needs to be engaged with.
Thank you. As one of those organisations who benefits from the decisions made by MTA in terms of being able to offer loans for social housing, I just want to thank and acknowledge that. And it has made a significant difference in terms of being able to provide housing to some very vulnerable families. So the Methodist Mission in Christchurch, we've got 15 new family homes that are about to open in December, and another 4 units for older people opening at Western Village. So, and that's really only been made possible because the church has made available to us loans at a reasonable level of interest, and I just want to acknowledge that and thank the church for it. I think in this discussion it's really important to remember why the decision was made about the 2%, and part of that was my recollection of that conversation was around the fact that Grafton Downs development wasn't going to have any social housing actually included in the development, and that was a real concern for us because as community housing providers and social service organisations, we're trying to work for mixed communities, and we're in a community there is a whole range of housing, and that we don't build housing just for the wealthy, but that we build it for people who are going to privately own it, for private renters, for shared equity and social housing. And that's becoming an increasing problem. We're trying to look at building some social housing in Blenheim, which has got one of the highest rates of homelessness per capita of anywhere in the country. In the last 2 years that we have provided an emergency 800 people through our emergency housing in Blenheim. That's actually 3% of the population of Blenheim. And that's what we're trying to respond to. But in a place like Blenheim, you've got these covenants on these developments, which means actually that no social housing is able to be built there. And so it was in that conversation, it was the challenge that was put to conference, and I think Greg's response, if I remember correctly, was that by having this 2%, it would mean that it's not just in one part of the country, but would provide a putia that could be used for increasing community housing throughout Aotearoa. So I just think it's really important to hold on to this, that there's a much deeper conversation underneath this 2%. And the final thing to say is when the Housing Community of Practice was looking at for these recommendations, we understand that this is a long-term project, that it's 20 to 30 years. What we really want is for this discussion around the 2% not to be forgotten. And that process is being put in place now so that we understand and what it is. So that when I go and challenge Marlborough District Council about why we can't find any land, and they say to me, well, you're doing developments exactly the same, I've got a response that I can give to them.
Can I ask you to repeat the first resolution, please? Number A. The one that you read to us this morning, but it isn't on the screen.
Okay. That in response to the housing crisis, we ask conference to rise to the challenge President Andrew made to look into our own hands and recognise the skills and resources Te Hāhi Retiariana has, and to use these to be part of the solution to the housing crisis.
Now, I think we need to have that written there so we can see, because it's actually quite different between acknowledging something and rising to the challenge of something. Because when we're rising to the challenge of something, we are actually saying we're prepared to put our hands in our pockets and put our dollars where our mouth is. There, we're simply... So I just want to be clear that we know what we're actually saying yes to before we say yes to it.
I think if that's the case, we are getting perilously close to lunchtime. If that needs to be added, I think we pause now, and that gets typed in. Immediately after lunch at 1:30, Sataita and Nicola are going to be leading us with their reflections of their time as President and Vice President, and then from 2 o'clock we will continue and we will complete our business. We will complete our business. Is that a decision of conference?
Thank you all for your attention. We will proceed to our lunch, but before that, we'll say the grace before we can. He's suggesting to pray for a carrot cake, but I'll pray for a chocolate cake. Let us pray. E tu rei ma da mai tana ka fiona, ma whawhita I tāpau katobe, ma winasia I hawa koe. La whakata mai whatongia o e konferensi. Ura ke mahopa I te pili iloi o tua, ma rota te a fiona, o muha tāpaki, muha iwa ti matou, la waka ma whakata avi ngai whatongia o toe, mi mua. Ma kore ngai mena Sisu Christ, ma wha mo oi. Amen. Amen.